Standing today because we've been sitting all day, but welcome everybody. Welcome to our live. I am James Marin, integrative registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist.
I'm Dahlia Marin, registered dietitian nutritionist. For those of you joining from our Facebook or Instagram, we are the co-founders of Married to Health. Thank you for being here with us. If this is your first time joining us live, we go live every other Friday. And so we talk all about Sibo, the who, what, when, where, how of Sibo. Mm-hmm. These are available on YouTube. And if you have questions, we answer questions for those who are in our private group. We do have a Good Gut Facebook membership group for those with whom we work on their Sibo IBS. Some of you might be in there. So we're happy to have you there. We're happy to have you here. And we answer questions from those who are in our group. But those of you who are not, you can still definitely tune in and hear what we have going on. If you wanted to go back, watch past lives, learn more about Sibo, because we've done several of them, feel free. They are on our YouTube.
And our Facebook. And now we're doing them on Instagram. So they'll be on Instagram as well. So hi, everyone from everywhere. We're so grateful to have you all in our community. Thank you for joining us on a Friday. I hope you all are having a wonderful Friday, getting ready for the weekend. Today's topic, we are talking about preventing Sibo, also known as IMO, intestinal microbial overgrowth, as well as IBS. They're all interchangeable. This is very special because you don't have to have these diseases, right? This applies to everybody, is what I'm trying to say. So everyone should be trying to prevent gut issues. And for those of you with friends and family, for those of you just kind of seeing what's going on in the world, we're seeing so many more chronic gut diseases emerge and just have a higher prevalence in our population. So this applies to so many of you. This definitely applies to children as well, because a lot of this you don't just wake up one day and are like, wow, I have a Sibo. And it just happened yesterday, and now I have Sibo, right? You've had chronic gut issues. And the more we explore with our patients, we find that, oh, wow, they've been constipated since they were 3 years old. They were born C-section. They were a colicky
baby. They had a poor diet growing up, and they just started eating vegetables in their late teens, early 20s, sometimes 30s. So it's always important to know your health story and understand, like James was saying, this is not, for the most part, an overnight thing. There are certain cases, right? You might have gotten food poisoning or might have post-infectious gastritis. That can be kind of an overnight thing. Like you could have amazing gut health one day and get food poisoning, and that can kind of shake your gut depending on what you picked up and what the bug was that you picked up. But for the most part, this is slow. It's very developing over time. And we wanted to talk today about ways to prevent it and kind of trying to ensure that you are fortified and that your gut is strong, and hopefully you will not have Sibo, IBS, or IMO, intestinal microbial overgrowth.
Right. Okay. So let's get into it. Should we start at the beginning? Because really, and this is great because maybe you have the power right now to prevent this for your children, right? So we hear about, vaginal delivery. We hear about just that birthing experience. We hear about Dahlia moving things around. We hear about, that important beginning to this story. And so that's where it all starts. I mean, where we can't emphasize enough how important breastfeeding is, how important to have that healthy, natural birthing plan. And maybe it doesn't go according to plan. Maybe you don't breastfeed. Maybe you have a C-section. We're not here to say that's wrong. You're doing things incorrectly. You're, less of in any way or anything like that. So it's super important to understand we are here just sharing evidence. We are here sharing experience from our patients. Again, the research that we've seen, we're not here to say, oh, because you didn't breastfeed or have a vaginal delivery, you did a detriment to your children. No, if anything, if you're pregnant now, if you're looking to get pregnant, if you're planning to have more children, it's important to maybe be a little more conscious and kind of look and see how can I do things maybe differently if they weren't done ideally the first time. And so every day we are trying to be better, right? Every day we're trying to be healthier. Every day we're trying to be more knowledgeable. At least that's how we feel, and that's what we want for all of you and all of our patients. So that's where we're coming from. We're coming from a place of love and kind of sharing this education. So I would say it starts in utero and definitely at birth. And really, you are giving a gift of your microbiota to the future generations, which are our children, right? So we want to pass that along in the best way possible. That is going to happen with vaginal delivery and breastfeeding. Okay.
And, I think if you're unable, say I had to have an emergency C-section, or I wasn't able to birth my baby vaginally, maybe large baby, small person, then you can be proactive. So say you had to do that, and say perhaps that you have to have a C-section. One cool thing that more hospitals are implementing is understanding that although you want the C-section process to be quite sterile because you don't want an infection if you are somebody who needs to have a C-section, babies should not be completely sterile. So now more hospitals are learning, and we've shared a study on this before, but really cool hospitals now are implementing policy that they'll ask the parents with a C-section, do they want baby swabbed with mom's vaginal microbiome? So that's a good way to first introduce baby to microbes. Right. So ask that if you're like, okay, I know I'm going to have a C-section. Ask the hospital, can you or do you swab baby with mom's vaginal microbiome? That could be, again, one of those preventive measures. If you can't breastfeed, you really want to understand options for formulas. Say you are going to give formula, totally fine. Many people do. I can't tell you how many times I've had many patients tell me, oh yeah, my mom said that I would always spit up, or they found out later that I had lactose intolerance or milk protein allergy. Babies can have casein and whey allergies where they're allergic to those milk proteins. And that can damage the microbiome when they are eating things that they are allergic to. So inform yourself, get informed. You really want to understand, and you really want to know, what are my options as far as formula goes? If I can't do cow's milk, what are some alternatives? Maybe I'm going to choose a soy formula, or I'm going to choose an alternative type of formula. I'm going to look into a milk bank, or hey, maybe I know someone who's breastfeeding who can donate breast milk to me. Those are all really great options. I'm going to ask my hospital what their policy is on bringing in donor milk for my breastfeeding baby if I know that I can't breastfeed. Maybe you had prior breast surgery. Maybe you had to have a mastectomy or breast implants that affect your milk ducts. So being informed, like James said. So that's right from the beginning. Knowing that dysbiosis is at play when it comes to Sibo, IMO. It almost always is present in instances of Sibo and IMO. So knowing how to prevent that dysbiosis.
And I want to back up here, because for those of you that maybe have Sibo, IMO, IBS, you're like, I know this alphabet soup. What we're essentially talking about is severe gas bloating, to where you have an overgrowth of microbes in your small intestine that's typically causing you to have excessive and painful bloating, gas. You can have constipation, diarrhea. And a lot of times we have a lot of patients who are like, yeah, I'm always gassy, bloated. I have a lot of diarrhea, or have a combination, right? So you can have different forms of IBS. And not saying if you have constipation right now or diarrhea that you have forms of IBS. So it's important that, we're not here to diagnose you. We're not here to scare you or anything, but we're talking about these symptoms because over time, they don't typically get better on their own. Like, very rarely do we have a patient go, yeah, I have all these symptoms and I just did nothing. I didn't make any changes and they got better over time. They typically get worse over time. They typically evolve. So this dysbiosis, this imbalance of microbes, typically gets worse over time, especially if you make no lifestyle changes or nutrition interventions. So if this is you, if you're like, yeah, I am kind of always bloated, or yeah, I do have diarrhea, not saying that you have these diagnoses, but it's important. Again, you can still apply these steps and apply this knowledge to say, oh, wow, let me make some changes or get some more information. So just want to clarify that. But to add anything else to add to that area, like the prenatal, postpartum, birthing, that's kind of where a big first step is, for sure.
Yeah, I think also knowing how to feed your kids, or really intending on helping prevent your kids have that dysbiosis. We've said it before. You guys have all heard us say, like, we don't believe in kid food. There's no kid food or adult food. I always want to encourage you all to practice introducing a lot of these different plant foods to your babies once they're up for it. So we know at 6 months, or and at least, and when the baby can hold their neck up on their own. You can start introducing solids if you feel comfortable and confident, although they say food before 1 is just for fun. So you don't have to, but once you start introducing solids, sure, there are puffs and sure, there are pouches and all of these baby foods.
And lots of kids will be eating ice cream and straight up sugary cereal, and like, ooh, the baby loves the popsicle and or the candy around, birthday parties, and the baby's sucking on the lollipop. That, look, it's completely not recommended for sure. And you have to understand, you voting, just like we vote with our daughter, just like we're voting with our dollar, you're voting with your calories, you're voting with your food. So,
and you're voting on behalf of your kids. So understand that responsibility. If you are a parent, that you have, it really is. We don't want it to sound daunting and we don't want it to sound negative, but you really do. You're making these choices for them. So choose wisely.
For sure. So there's kind of phase 1, when you birth your child, that prenatal experience. Phase 2 is feeding your child. So chances are you, as a child, if you're experiencing gut issues, if I, let's say, was experiencing gut issues, then, it happened at an early age. It was set up. The stage was set at a very young age.
So diet is one component with kids. Another thing I always ask my patients about is, how was your antibiotic use when you were younger? How did that look? Yes. How frequently were you taking antibiotics? Were you that kid who had constant ear infections, upper respiratory infections, sinus infections, tonsil infections? How did that look? How was your steroid use? So that also can kind of factor in and play a part into dysbiosis as well. So you want to be asking yourself those questions. You want to understand that for preventing dysbiosis. And Sibo, a big part of Sibo is dysbiosis. So again, that imbalance of inflammatory to anti-inflammatory microbes. When they're in balance and they're in harmony, it's called eubiosis. When they're out of whack and you have overgrowths and overabundances, that's called dysbiosis. So medication and supplements can play a part into that. Diet can play a part into that. Another thing we always like to ask about is any trauma. Even in childhood, how was your childhood? Just yesterday I had a patient tell me, I had a really traumatic childhood. My parents got divorced when I was 7 years old. I was depressed about it for over a decade. That can also play into a little bit with dysbiosis in a few ways. There have been studies that have shown direct correlation of stress leading to greater dysbiosis. So stress leading to greater prevalence and abundance of inflammatory microbes. We also know when you are stressed, you're in that fight or flight. And we love talking about this because it's so important. And I think it's really important because we live in a society that almost praises stress. Like, oh, you're a hustler. Like, oh, look at you. You manage so much. I don't know how you do it. You're super mom. Being busy is not a superpower. Especially if it's crushing you.
Yeah.
So when you are very stressed, you're in fight or flight. You're in go, go, go. Your body is going to really reserve all of its energy to help you go, go, go. It's not going to be shunting energy away for, hey, let me make sure that Delia has her hormones balanced right now. And let me make sure Delia is digesting really well. I know I won't die if my hormones are out of whack or if I'm not digesting well. My body knows that. So if I'm constantly stressed, I'm constantly in fight or flight, I'm not enabling my body to take rest and have times where it's spending time in that parasympathetic rest and digest, feed and breed is what I also like to call it. When we are de-stressing, when we are really supporting our nervous system, we're telling it, okay, now's the time to rest and relax and rejuvenate. Sleep is an important time to do that. That is really when we're recirculating and metabolizing a lot of our hormones, stress hormones, reproductive hormones, all kinds of hormones. Sleep is when we're rejuvenating our cells, including cells in our gut. So sleep is important. And again, addressing trauma, trying to reduce stress around stressful situations. That can start in childhood, that can start later on in life. So you want to kind of understand that. So I always like to take my patients along a timeline of, okay, maybe this was a time where your gut was hit. After that, you want to consider times in their life where perhaps their diet was significantly changed. I often hear from my patients, well, yeah, when I was in college, I ate like crap and I binge drank. That might affect your gut. So you want to ask about those times. Was there a significant change in your diet? Were you started on any different medication? I can't tell you how many patients have told me, Once I got off my birth control, or once I started birth control, that's when a lot of my gut issues began. So birth control could be one. Again, it could be steroids. So ask about these different medications. Or I had to take antibiotics for 2 years. They were giving it to me for my acne, or I was put on Accutane, or whatever it is. That could, in your health story, be something that you can kind of investigate a little bit more if you're intending on preventing Sibo. So we've kind of taken you up to the timeline of adulthood.
Yes. And so in that adulthood, we also typically find this perfect storm scenario. So like all those things Dahlia mentioned, we find that they can correlate really well in a cluster. So when we find, let's say, for example, a patient who, I recently got divorced. And so that was very traumatic. Maybe you have kids. I recently got divorced, and now I'm taking a vacation to Thailand, and I'm switching my job. And then also I'm moving. Since I'm traveling, I'm just eating out a lot, and I'm traveling overseas, and I'm at the airport with all the people and being exposed to all these different things. So that is quite the cluster. And this happens more often than we even realize, even for our lives. And so what you're doing is you're asking of your microbiota so much. You've been through so much of that trauma, that stress. Maybe you were exposed to something in a whole different land. And really in no other time in human history have we been able to travel like we can. So we can go from LA to Thailand in like a day? And whereas before, imagine a couple hundred years ago, imagine a couple 1,000 years ago, that would be quite the journey, right? You would be a whole different, you might not even make it in your lifetime to do that journey, right? Let alone to actually reach it, it would probably be decades. And over those decades, you travel those lands, you'd adjust to different biomes and different ecosystems and different foods. So for us to go, hey, in one day I'm going to Thailand, and then maybe you're traveling again and again and again, that is quite stressful on our microbiota. So all of these things can cluster together and activate something underlying, really show kind of the weak links in your genetics and in your microbiome, which is the DNA of your microbes. So all that factors into you right now on top of the history that we laid out. So very interesting stuff.
Other things to then consider. You've made it to adulthood, and now we're trying to really understand your health story. Like James said, you might have been that person who's been constipated, or you might over time become more and more constipated. I sometimes will find this with my patients who have had pregnancies and deliveries, whether it was a vaginal delivery or not. Sometimes during pregnancy, right, we're always peeing. That's kind of like a taboo thing of pregnant women are always peeing. You have a weight sitting on your bladder. You have a weight sitting on your pelvic floor muscles. We have these amazing muscles that sit at the base of our pelvis, and on top of our pubic bone, pelvic bones. We have these muscles. When you have a big baby, especially if you're a small person, you have this baby, this 6, 7, 8, 9 pound sitting there day after day, and that might weaken your pelvic floors. Or you might be that person who says, I've been constipated my whole life, or I've had diarrhea and gas my whole life. So maybe you're that person who's always clenching, right? You're trying not to let gas pass. You're trying not to have an accident with runny stool. You might then have overly strained pelvic floor muscles. Then they're maybe not releasing and relaxing when you're trying to poop, when you're trying to have a bowel movement. So look into pelvic floor issues. Again, whether you had a vaginal delivery, C-section, you're someone else who's had that could be an issue. As we age, right? Sometimes physical activity changes. Physical activity is great for your gut. We've said it so many times, but literally moving your body moves your bowels too. If you're suddenly going from being an active person to having a desk job, you want to ask yourself, am I being physically active? Am I physically moving my bowels? Is your diet significantly different? So whether that is I'm eating healthier now, and overnight I said I'm going on this diet, and now I'm all of a sudden really healthy. Did your diet change significantly? Or travel, right? You're all of a sudden expecting your microbiome to acclimate to completely different foods depending on where you're traveling. You're also picking up different types of bugs and other types of microbes in that environment. So diet. As we age, chronic disease can play in. So we know with things like cardiovascular disease, unless there's a genetic component, usually there's a dietary component, and it's not usually conducive to good gut health. Same with diabetes. With diabetes, there's risk for nerve function. So just like we talk about neuropathy, nerve death with diabetes, and people always talk about the eyes or the kidneys or teeth sometimes are mentioned, the gut should also be mentioned. There's something called diabetic enteropathy, where those nerves in the gut might die. So taking control of your type 1, type 2 gestational diabetes, really trying to prevent that preventable, irreversible damage is important as well.
Wow.
There, a couple other things. So other neurodegenerative diseases, Parkinson's is one that you want to look into. Sometimes our patients with Alzheimer's might experience slow motility. We might see this in those who have a traumatic brain injury. All of a sudden, you might not have that really amazing motility that you used to. So things to look into. And then this is really important, you guys. I find this so often. Those who are on restrictive diets, which if you're having gut issues, I can almost ensure that you've been on a restricted diet before, but prolonged restriction can deplete important nutrients from your gut. So if you're depleted of B vitamins, which are so important for motility, if you're depleted of fat-soluble vitamins that help with that nerve signaling, like vitamins A, D, E, and vitamin K, if you're depleted of your omega-3s, of vitamin C, all of these things can play into your motility. So being on highly restricted diets or having gut issues for such a long time, not absorbing from the first place, and then also being nutrient deficient, that is something that's so important, something you can try to prevent, and something that's so important to look into to hopefully help you prevent Sibo, IMO, any of these overgrowths.
Yes. Okay.
Crash course.
That was a lot. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't worry. It's very normal. There's a lot to this, but just know that's why we love the gut. That's why we love the microbiome and the microbiota, is because we feel it's really the root. It's getting to the core of so much in our life, so much in our lifestyle that plays into our health. So that's why we love what we do, and we love talking about these different topics. I'm going to answer some questions. So I do see some questions. How do you guys feel about protein supplements for gut health? So wonderful question. That's another thing, is supplementation. So many people on protein supplements, especially, we've become very protein focused. So with protein supplements, really quality and type, and again, not all brands are equal, right? You don't just go to like CBS and think, oh yeah, this protein shake is going to be great for me. It is the preservatives, it's how it's processed, it's the type of protein. We do know overall isolated forms of protein can impact the gut. It is a high concentration of protein, which then alters your gut microbiota. And if you are experiencing symptoms already, if typically the person consuming a ready-to-drink protein shake is in a hurry, maybe you're rushed, you don't have time to actually sit down and eat a meal, you're going to work, you're picking up the kids, you're already in a stressed state, right? You're not in that rest and digest, and then you're chugging down some protein shake with maybe some artificial colors, preservatives, maybe it's a whey or casein protein that is a little more inflammatory to your gut. Maybe with that dairy-based protein, there's more contaminants. So a lot of things to think about. Overall, you do want to get your protein from whole food sources. Whole food sources of protein are excellent, like legumes, like high protein seeds, but there are some good protein supplements out there. It's just kind of navigating and looking for them.
And I love that question. We'll probably do a whole live on supplements in the gut.
Yes.
So I love that. But short answer, I would say, again, not only like James said, that some of the protein isolates can be inflammatory. Also, if you're someone who's like, oh yeah, my breakfast every single day is a protein shake, where's your diversity? So if you're just putting protein powder in water or milk, plant milk, you're not getting a plant diversity. So you also want to kind of understand, is that protein powder displacing other whole food nutrients that you could be eating? So we'll definitely talk more about that as well. Love these questions. Again, those in our group, we answer the questions for those who are in our Good Gut membership. If you guys wanted to learn more, if you're like, hey, I want to see how a dietitian or I can get a bigger care team, you can reach out to us at Married to Health. So you guys can go to our website, marriedtohealth.com.
Yep.
You can follow us on Facebook. You can find us on various platforms. We love sharing good gut information with you guys. And although we love helping those who already have SIBO, have IBS, have gut issues, we love helping prevent them and empower you all with the information to say, I'm done. I want to, I want to take back my gut health, empower myself to feel really well. It's so, so, so important.
And our goal is to help you tolerate and incorporate more plant foods. That is our mission. So whether you're 5 years old, 5 months old, 50 years old, that's our mission. So it is most definitely possible. We do believe in the power of plants, and they do have a wonderful beneficial effect on your gut microbiota. So thank you all. We hope you enjoyed this live. We'll be here every other Friday. Again, if you have more questions or concerns or want to learn more, click below, comment, follow, check us out, marriedtohealth.com, and we'll see you guys back here very soon.
Get that plant diversity in, work on your motility, and have a good gut. All right. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Should we share it to IGTV? This is not.